Thank you. It's great to be back here. It's such a great time here in April. And you're seeing a very sneak peek. Just last week, me and my team finished the rough cut. How many of you have ever seen a rough cut of a film? Okay, so for those that haven't, it really means it's not completely done. So you're going to see, sometimes the sound is not complete, or we're just experimenting with sound design. Some places you'll even see some text on there like this will be animated. So when I was it was like hot off the presses. If there could be some equivalent in film, this is the case. I'm really excited to share it with you. It is a film that explores what it means to be connected in the 21st century. So I explore that in the ways that you would assume technologically, but I also explore it in a bigger sense of just about connectedness with all the major issues of the 21st century. And then I also explore it on an emotional level, in a personal way. So the tagline we're kind of playing with, and after you see it, I'd love to hear what you think. We're exploring So Connected, an autobiography about life, death, and the pursuit of technology. Because we're trying to make sure that it has this personal component. So we're still in that place where this is part of the creative process. Film is extremely collaborative. I was just talking with my good friend Jonathan about the difference. I also sculpt, which is a very private thing for me, and I don't really show my work that much, and it's much more just about being in a studio for 4 hours with a model and just doing something that I get into a different space. But filmmaking is very much, in some ways, every audience, I really feel what you're reacting to, and because this is a rough cut, I try to feel the vibe of the room, and I've had some rough cut screenings, and it's really interesting of people that don't know me versus do, filmmakers, technologists. It's really interesting how you can kind of feel a room, and so this will be also good for me because it's not done. So we'll be spending the next 4 months tweaking and showing it to various people and advisors. So you are one of the very first groups. So I'm going to show you the setup, which is the first 10 minutes of the film. Or actually, I'll probably show you maybe the first 17 minutes. Then I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to kind of jump to the end to show you where some of these ideas land. Because the second clip has, I think, a lot to do with leadership in the 21st century, because being a leader today, you have to think about the implications of the connectedness. We are in a web of data and a web of connectedness, and it has so many implications for the way you inspire people, the way that you get them activated to do something, and the way you're able to follow up with them and keep them along with whatever crusade for good you're doing, which I'm sure many of you are doing here. So I think I'm going to start with Sophocles, who said, "Nothing vast enters the life of mortals without a curse." And you'll see how I explore in the film that I really believe that technology is both a curse and has incredible vastness to it. So with that, I'm going to, hopefully we can lower the lights. There are my AV folks. If you can turn off your beeping objects, cell phones, I don't know if they have rules here about that. Let me just get to the clip. So again, there's going to be some stuff, it's not the highest resolution you're going to see. The next 4 months, we'll come back here and do a full screening, because there's so much that, whatever. There's so much that happens in the movie that you're not seeing, but it'll happen sometime in early 2011. Stay tuned.
Wow, Leonard Shlain. Please read his books if you haven't already. Incredible man. An honor to meet his daughter. I just want to first start by saying that I really personally hope that this film catalyzes an awareness of our inextricable interconnectedness and unleashes compassion and allows oxytocin to flow freely in the world. That's my
I hope so too. I mean, it's a recent idea about the oxytocin thing, but when I heard that research, it really blew me away. That it really gave me hope. Because, I'm reading this book, What's Mine is Yours, and Yours is Mine. It's a new business book that just came out about how much collaborative businesses are starting, and how that they're linking that to the internet, that the internet is teaching us how to be more collaborative. So that's the hope. And so as much as I struggle with technology, because you saw at the beginning, I also really wrestle with it personally. But on the bigger picture, I really believe it's going to take humanity to the next level. And I'm an optimist.
So I just have two questions, and I want to open it up to all of you.
Yeah.
First, as we reclaim, reintegrate, and revalue the right brain in the equation,
Yes.
can you talk about film as a tool for change and your journey in developing this increasingly powerful influence?
Yeah, I definitely think, my father wrote about this in this book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, where if you were to read one of his books, that would be the one I'd recommend. But, that we are moving into this right brain culture with all these images. And I do think with all the data, I just had the pleasure of spending the day yesterday with MIT's geospatial labs. And, the vast data that we're able to have access to and see patterns, because that's what it's really all about now. We have such computing power, we have so much data, that it's all about looking for the patterns now. The patterns in people, the patterns in behavior, the patterns in crisis, that, it's about seeing those connections. So I think that's the era that we're in. And personally, I was running the Webby Awards, and I was just about to have my first child, and all the women in the audience, when you have a child, or if you do, you have to really work differently. And I was working like 70, 80-hour weeks running the Webby Awards. Events are very time-intensive. And every year I had to put the same amount of energy, if not more, to kind of one-up what we had done the previous year. So I was working so much. And Bush had just come into office, and the first thing he did was cut off funding to family planning all over the world, and I was so pissed about that. So I approached Planned Parenthood, and I said, let me make a film for you to re-engage my generation on reproductive choice and the importance of it, because I felt like we were not engaged enough. So I made this film called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. It took me 3 months to make.
Wow.
And put it out there, and got into Sundance, and every Planned Parenthood in the country used it to raise awareness for the election and for fundraising. And and that was before you could show a movie on the web, if you can imagine. It was before YouTube. But I was just starting to see the power of like a short film, because that was only 12 minutes long. A short film coupled with the power of the web to make social change. And here I was just about to start having a child, and I thought, God, look at that. That thing lives without me. Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness, it still plays all over the country. It doesn't need me anymore. So I thought, that's working much smarter with my time. I could be much more effective. So shortly after, I wanted to sell the Webby Awards, and I was going to devote my career to film coupled with the power of web and live events to make change. After that, I made The Tribe, and then I made a film called Yelp, which I'll show you in a little bit. It's just 2 minutes. And I make these... the films to me are just triggers for discussion. So I also, I worked with professors, from Harvard and Columbia and Berkeley to make this curriculum. This was on this other film I made about cultural identity. And we have a whole discussion kit, which have conversation cards around the film. So to me, the film is just the appetizer, and the main course is the discussion and the activism that come from it, or just the thinking that comes from it. So somebody was asking me, what's your goal with Connected? I mean, if there was one goal, it would just people stop and think of what is Connected. We're all moving so quickly, and these tools are just changing our behavior so much, and what does that mean? What does that mean personally to you? What does that mean as a leader? And I just think we need to stop and think more. I have a little section in the film where I kind of come to that, but that we don't take that time, and I think it's really important as we're kind of speeding up. Everything's speeding up. So that's kind of how I got on that. It's a long answer to a short question.
You mean disconnect?
What?
You mean disconnect?
Yeah, funny you say disconnect. Can I just show you one more 2-minute film on the subject of disconnection? Because I made a whole little film about it. Let me just get it up here. Because I told you I wrestle with disconnection, and I made a little film with my husband about it. Can we get lights down? We just try to turn off the phone. I mean, it's just being present. That was like one of my big lessons with my last year with my father was you've got to be present. Turn off the phone, turn it off, and just be with the people you love. As much as you can see, I believe in the bigger message of it, the bigger potential of it, but the personal relationships, we have to create boundaries because being present as a leader, as a lover, as a partner, as a friend, it's so important. And I think that's going to be the big struggle of our next period of time. I wonder if our kids will laugh that I'm even saying to unplug, because they'll be blinking instead of searching and clicking, and who knows, that might be just a ridiculous premise to unplug, but that's what in our generation, I think that's what we're going to struggle with.
Thank you. Well said. And on that note, you've touched upon these dangers, and that quote you opened from Sophocles, the dangers of hyperconnectivity. What are they, and how do we navigate around them to achieve optimal potential in an interdependent world?
Well, I think interpersonally, if we can be present, but then, it's such an exciting time to be alive right now. The fact that you can just connect with all these people with common interests from all over the world and do things together. It's so exciting. I'm so glad I'm alive at this moment, and it's good to think about other moments when big technologies. The reason why I talk about the alphabet is when books came around, they said people aren't going to have a memory anymore. That was the big concern of that day, was that books were going to remove our memory. And that's really interesting to think about, that was the concern. And then when TV came around, and I certainly know growing up, I was a TV child, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, Three's Company, Brady Bunch. I watched all that. My brain didn't go to mush. That's what they said back then. Remember that? It was like your brain's going to go to mush. It didn't go to mush. So, I think about how distracted I really do work differently now. I'm very multitasking in a way that when I watched my father do surgery, he was so focused, just didn't move from the body, like just telling the nurses to hand him things. And he had such myopic focus for sometimes 7 and 8 hours. Can you imagine? No. Right? We don't work that way anymore. And I really think it has changed our minds. But I also know I'm very productive, and I can mobilize huge numbers of people around issues with the click of the mouse. So, those are the things. Like, there's potential, and there's also, we have to be I think it's like mindfully plugging in and mindfully unplugging.
Well, Allison, I was going to say, let's open it up to questions. I want to hear from everyone.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Allison Schiffer. I'm a graduate of the Mid-Career Program, and I work at the Center for Public Leadership. I'm a big fan of The Tribe. It's a great film. And I'm wondering, as I see this, I'm wondering about the future of tribal identity or traditional group identity, when so many members of the group are forming so many connections between groups and with other groups. And how do you think,
Yeah.
what do you think that'll happen?
So I made this film called The Tribe that she's referring to, which explores American Jewish identity told through the history of the Barbie doll. I know it sounds like a bizarre premise, but I try to use humor to delve into these heavier issues. And actually, as I was watching Yelp after I watched Connected, you'll see I've created all these animations with my fantastic animator, Stefan Nadelman. And a lot of the archival images you'll see, because they're used, if you watched my earliest films, from 15 years ago, you'll see some of the same shots, because to me, they're like my paints. I'll find a shot I love, and I'm like, that to me represents that. Or that animation that we spent a month creating always is going to represent that to me. So back to The Tribe. So that film really explored, tribal identity. What does it mean in the 21st century? Because we associate with so many different tribes. So I'm Jewish, but I probably wouldn't first tell you that. I'd probably say I'm a Democrat. I'd probably tell you I'm from San Francisco, because that says a lot about me, right? By choice. I'm from there, but I lived in other places and went back. And then if you were Jewish, I'd probably tell you I was Jewish, because I know when other people are Jewish. Or if I thought you were Jewish, but I wasn't sure, I'd throw out some Yiddish and see if you responded. But it's definitely not the first way I'd identify, and I think that is how it's changing, that we have so many, I'm part of the Twitter tribe, I'm part of this tribe, and so it's kind of exciting, because I think there's so many different ways that I connect with people. Like when people are really into Twitter, I'm like, oh, I'm really into Twitter. We have something in common. And so that becomes a question, is it about commonality? And now that we have all these interest graphs and social graphs, and I feel connected to a lot more people than I think our parents' generation did. Where, my parents were Jews. They were American Jews from immigrant parents. And that was a very specific tribe from back east. That was like a kind of person. Not that it was, but you know what I mean? That's how they identified. And So I think you have a lot more choices. So what that, if you did a mathematical equation on that, that means that I have a lot more tribes. So I'm connected to that many more people. So that's kind of exciting. But I also think with Judaism, you know, the issue of diaspora, and now we have the internet to kind of bring us together online, and what does that mean? And so.
It's kind of like a cultural Judaism versus.
Yeah, I am actually agnostic, so I am definitely more on the cultural Jew than the religious Jew. Yeah, and the film is a lot about that, because I think a lot of Jews, if they feel disconnected from Judaism, it's because they're like, well, I don't believe in God, or they don't believe in the religious parts. But the film is, Judaism is very cultural. Like, there's a line in there that somebody says, I'm a culinary Jew.
Great.
Yeah, it was great, right? So I would probably, you know, you like bagel, eggs, and cream cheese, you like the Jewish food, you're a culinary Jew. And I'm big into the open the tent wide. Like, I have friends that aren't Jewish that love a lot of the Jewish ideals. So in my mind, they're a little Jewish. So, but I'm kind of an open tent creature, you know, in general. Yeah.
My name is Robert Belk. I'm a first year in question about the rise of the right side of the brain you were talking about, and sort of how that affects you think in education. Because there's sort of a push these days to, hey, we need to be better in sciences and maths and things like that. And I wonder how that's going to move in later. If we keep focusing on that, how are we developing kids that when they become adults that aren't?
That's a great, I just tweeted yesterday this great quote by Picasso, like, we're all born artists, and then I'll get it wrong, but something we unbecome artists as we get older. Like, you start as an artist, like anything's possible, and you're creative in the way you think, but that's a great point, because you're right, they're pushing, my husband's a professor of robotics, and he pushes down our daughters, you know, we're pushing math so heavily, and you're right, but I do art with her, you know, like female, male, but he pushes her so hard in math, and I push it too, because I don't want girls, I think, you know, a lot of women drop off on the math. So that's a great point, but I'll tell you, there is a big trend. Like, when I went to UC Berkeley, I was an interdisciplinary studies major, which at the time was pretty rare. There was like 7 of us, and you had to find the professors, and I cobbled together my degree, because I wasn't just interested. I was interested in biology and film and philosophy, and, you know, so I did it. Well, now there's a big wave in academia for interdisciplinary studies, interdisciplinary centers, Stephen, you know, working in interdisciplinary departments. So that's a big rise on the academic level, but you're right, in lower level, you know, I'm trying with this film, we're going to come up with a whole curriculum. We're working with the Center for Eco-Literacy, which is all about bringing systems thinking back to schools. So in the film, although you didn't see that part, another little teaser, but there's a whole section on systems thinking, and, you know, how many of you do you know about systems thinking theory? Oh, see, only one. Systems theory? Wow, that's really interesting. Well, we want to bring it back. So it's all about thinking of things in systems. So E.O. Wilson, hopefully you guys all know, he said the future of science is the science of systems. That it used to be you looked at things on their own, and now you can't look at something without thinking of it in this web of a system. Like, the ecosystem is what we always talk about, but I think it's bigger than the ether. The ecosystem relates to the technological system, relates to the social graph system, relates to the corporate system. So it's about looking at things as connected instead of looking at them in parts. So that's a kind of another big landing idea. So the systems theorist, did he go to Harvard or MIT? Anyways, one of the schools. But he's a fascinating guy in the 50s, where in academia in the 50s, they all started talking about how the fields interrelated, and which is really what the film's about.
Did you say holistic or is that?
Yeah, holistic. You know, it's really interesting because we have this quote on the wall in the editing room. I have a great team, about 6 people, and we put all these quotes on the wall, and one of them was called, "We can shape the woo-woo." And what that meant was, sometimes when I told people I was making a film called Connected, everyone would assume it was a New Age film, which is really funny, because so we would always say, we can shape the woo-woo, which means, like, that we are probably speaking about a lot of ideas that the New Age movement also speaks about, but from a very more pragmatic perspective. But they're interesting ideas, and a lot of people, I think, discount what the New Age movement is talking about is that we are one. What a lot of religions and spirituality is, we are one. We're all one thing. And at the end of the film, you know how I start with the Big Bang as the beginning of human history? So at the very end of the film, I take the whole film in reverse and I go back to the Big Bang. It's like we were all one thing. We are all connected. Like from our atom level, molecule level, we're all connected. And that's one of the bigger messages of the film.
Well, along those lines, there was a quote that you said, we're all so connected that we're disconnected. So we are very connected, but it's less intimate. It's less human in a way, right? Because, so my question is that picture of the guy jumping into the computer, are we becoming our technology? And is there importance to make that separation between us and technology, or do you think, again, the whole becoming one thing, don't you? And I think I said it as well, right?
That's a great point. I mean, I threw that image, that is the kind of question, right? Like as we jump into the computer, into our virtual world, like I don't believe that we're not going to live in this world. And when I started the Webbys, everyone said the computers are going to isolate us. Well, that's simply not the case. We're all sitting here, right? So I think it gathers you with people with common interests so that you'll meet with them. So, but I think the concern you raise is really valid. How do you, I think technology isn't this other. I think it's an extension of the human spirit. Our need to connect. I can't remember if I showed you that part, but it's like, and my father talked about technology as this extension that we couldn't, if you think of a telescope as an extension of the eyes, and a lot of these technologies are to extend us. But that's driven from humans. And I think a lot of people talk about technology as other, but it's not. It's us. And how technology can be used for good or bad. I mean, like we saw with 9/11, the planes, that's a horrible, scary, horrific use of technology. So the technology is neutral. It's like the human spirit that flows through it is how it's shaped. But it's what?
It's neutral.
Technology is neutral, and the spirit that you project into it is right.
Can I just get the following to that? I guess what I'm most concerned about is the art of conversation. Because I appreciate you can connect through the computer or the internet, but there's no conversation. And I have friends who tweet all the time, and I find them speaking in tweets. We talk
Really?
in 160 character, phrases back and forth, boom, 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 boom.
Wait, on the computer, but what about when you see them live?
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking live, that they are, especially in the
It's a
workplace.
screenplay.
In the workplace environment, yeah, people are talking in like they're writing an email. You have your bullet, whatever you do, very succinct. And I wonder, about this art of conversation. I just think that I know we're connecting, and we are connecting through words, but we're not connecting through conversation.
I don't know. At my dinner table, everyone would speak over each other, and they still do that. That's an interesting point. I'll have to think about that. But I generally don't think that. I see people going on their cell phone when I haven't seen me. I opened the movie that way because I thought I'd never become that person. I hated those people.
Maybe speaking more in platitudes rather than deeper concepts.
I don't know. I'm talking to you all very honestly, and I'm on Twitter. No, but I'm just thinking because I'm my own case study. I always think I've changed. I'm a filmmaker, so I think a lot about distribution. And in the last 6 months, I'm downloading everything instead of Netflix, which is my behavior's changed so much. So I always kind of think of what am I doing, because I'm usually testing out technologies first. So what is my early adapterness? So I guess I'm saying I still am talking to you all very honestly and in long sentences. Am I?
Yeah.
I don't know. But that's an interesting
I'm
point.
actually more worried about the next generation, because I see my kids who I am the same person back and forth, and it goes on for 20 minutes, and I'm like, why don't you just pick up the phone and call the person?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Why would I do that when I am back and forth?
Yeah, the way that they use technology is definitely, that is. Go ahead.
In a sense, that's kind of a different kind of conversation. You carry on, I can't remember what it is, but it's like you're still carrying on a conversation, but you have time to
Process.
It's like watching TV on the net. You can actually stop it when you want and go back to it.
Yeah.
And you can do that with conversation.
Well, I think there's certain people, it's like there's certain people I just enjoy emailing more than talking to. It's so, members of the family maybe? It's weird, my brother, who's a very charming guy, but on email he's so curt. I'm like, who is this creature? One word response, because he doesn't want to have that interplay. He's a doctor, he's very busy. He's like, I don't want to exchange every email. Okay, I get it. So it's like he's trained me to do that to him. I do no fluffiness around his emails. I'm just like, yes, no, because that's the way he does it, so I've kind of followed his tune. But But do I think people's conversations? See, I don't think everyone, is this going to replace this? I don't buy it. I think that, culture always influences things. I mean, certainly my films are getting short. Like I have this is an 84-minute film, but I have this new initiative where I'm going to make like 4 just 2-minute films about really important subjects that I think are really important to just put out on the web. Like that film Yelp went viral and got sent in crazy places, and I'm excited about, the shorter attention span is true. Hitchcock used to say a film should be as long as your bladder can hold, which is an hour and a half. But now, yeah, exactly. Whenever I'm sitting in a movie van an hour and a half, I'm like, yeah, you have to go with the human body on that one, right? So
maybe it's like his sixth sense of, am I better than your bladder?
I'm going to control your bladder, right? But yeah, exactly, for my movie, right? How much do you love my work? Yeah, but I still love going to a movie theater because nothing can distract me. Because when I watch a movie at home, I fall asleep. I fall asleep on the couch or I get up. And I think as a filmmaker, oh my God, I would hate for people to watch this at home because they're so distracted.
Alfred and this gentleman.
I'm Alfred, I'm a fellow at HTS. I'm curious about moxie, the nerve and boldness. You've got a lot of moxie from your father as a role model.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about developing children in their left and right brains, how do you think we can imbue a sense of moxie or inject some moxie in kids?
That's a great question.
That you had?
Okay. Well, first, before I forget, I brought a sign up, so if you guys want to, we can pass that around. If you want to add your email, I do quarterly emails, but just about my company's films and whatever. So I'll put that out there. So Moxie. Well, it's interesting you ask about that, because I just gave the commencement speech at Cal at UC Berkeley, and my whole speech was about Moxie. Because I wrote this other speech, and I gave it to my husband, and he's like, Tiffany, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear how you got the Moxie to do what you do. And when he said that, I was like, oh, okay. Because, I feel very blessed. I had 2 parents who loved me. My mother's still alive, loved me, and I felt very supported. Both my parents were feminists, and so I know that were just like critical ingredients in my Moxie. But Moxie's like a muscle if you exercise it. Like when I speak now, I really don't get nervous. And when I was young, at Cal that was 12,000 people. I got a little nervous. But normally I don't get nervous anymore because I've done it so much. But it's like a muscle. So I think going out and taking a risk, like I'm the friend that if my friends are in jobs they don't love, I'm like, quit. Do it. This is one life. You're going to die. Do it. I'm that friend that's like pushing. So I think that, you've got to do your passion. You've got to do social change. You have to do what you love. You have to be a good mom. Don't forget to have children, women. That's the other thing I will say. A lot of my friends worked so hard in their careers, they waited too long. I had a lot of fertility problems, so as I sit here with a room of women, that's a really important message I always try to say. But to have Moxie, you've got to, as I watched my father, who lived such a beautiful life, and he died, and I know I probably seem like I'm talking about it, like not as emotionally as you would think for somebody that was this close, but he lived such a good life. He took every risk. He lived life with such moxie and just risk, and he loved it. He was a surgeon. He wanted to write a book, and then he wrote a book about art and physics, but he was just a surgeon, but he just did it, self-taught. And my mom, had kids first, went back to school, got a PhD in psychology, just went for it. So, and my whole family are like that. If you had a dinner at our house, everyone's very go do it. And so I guess I just think you should just, if you want to hear that talk is a whole talk about Moxie, because I don't have very much time, but I think you can acquire Moxie. If you did not have parents who did that, I think it is something it's a muscle. Try on little things, push yourself a little, push yourself more. You're all sitting here because you have Moxie, because this is Harvard and this is an amazing school, so. Chutzpah, that's another word for it. But it's different. Actually, I think chutzpah has a little bit of a pushiness to it, whereas Moxie is like a muscle. Would my Jewish friends agree on the Yiddish? Chutzpah and Moxie. It's a little different. Hi,
my name is Philip, and I'm a studio in Canada School. So I have push back a little bit on this whole systems thinking approach. I want to give you a bit more on that.
Yeah.
I see very well the urgent need of making more connections, but I also see very much the danger of becoming too superficial. And back to that whole technology approach, like we live in this very technicalized society and environment, and when people actually don't realize that you're always confronted not with neutral technology, but with technology designed by people, with presenting research results in a certain order, presenting the suggestions, like you may also want to buy this book, with companies deciding what apps you can run on a device. So you always need to question it 2 or 3 steps further than just in the very first layer, and so that needs some more in-depth technological understanding. Not, you don't need to know how to code, but you need to be interested in how it actually works.
Yeah, and how it's affecting you. Well, I think that context is super important. I mean, context will always be important. And as far as systems think, in interdependent systems require that they're specialists. If you think about an interdependent system, the fact that there are farmers allows me to be the hunter or the surgeon. The line I have in the film, my father was a general surgeon, but now everyone's specialized because they have to. There's so much data about the human body. So I think it's just as important to delve deep, but I think you need to have the perspective to step back and see how things are connected. I know people have to leave at 1, right? So I don't feel rude if you have to get up and go. I was relieving you all of guilt. But so did that answer? I don't know. I'm feeling a little conscious of time. So.
I was wondering about
Yeah.
I was reading a book about how cultural influence the logical, emotional mind.
Yeah.
Western and culture. And the way that in Asia, the one tend to be more emotional and versus more logical.
Really? That's interesting.
And I was wondering about how can the cultural influence transform that emotional connection? How can that be done?
Well, this film, for a year and a half, had no emotional story in it. And it was a really interesting film, but it had no soul. I can't really describe it, but I've never been in one of my own films. It's very weird for me to be sitting here and on the screen at the same time. It feels weird. And I was never in my own films, and I had all these big ideas I was trying to communicate, and I watched the film, and I got funding based on a very intellectual film. And I watched the film, and I was going through this really heavy year, and film did not move me. And it was at that moment I had this big epiphany. I was like, I have to get the emotional story in. And it was my own story, which was even harder. I went into this film kicking and screaming. Like, for a long time, I wasn't even on screen. You just heard my voice. My team's like, you gotta be on there. They need to know who you are. And it was like this whole thing. The minute I got the emotion in the story, I mean, you only saw clips, but by the time you get to the end, you have the emotion to get the idea. And and I talked about this during the film forum, because in a lot of ways, documentaries, if you think of the good documentaries, they reach you emotionally so that you can, and I heard this panel at Sundance where they said that the emotional story is like the Trojan horse for the bigger idea. So I think emotion, it's all about emotion. Without the very difficult process of putting myself in the film and sharing with you all a very heavy experience for me, I just think the film was half of itself. So if you think about emotional connection or being more emotional, that's good. I mean, that's only good. So if you say that in Asia people are more emotional, that is great. I would love to read what you, if we could talk afterwards, because I'd love to read that article, because I'm super interested in that kind of stuff.
I'm trying to put a documentary film on the book I just finished.
Oh, great. I'd love to read it. Okay. Well, I don't know if we should end. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Folks, if if you can turn off your beeping objects, cell phones, I don't know if they have rules here about that. Let me just get to the clip. So again, there's going to be some stuff, it's not the highest resolution you're going to see. The next 4 months, we'll come back here and do a full screening, because there's so much that, whatever. There's so much that happens in the movie that you're not seeing, but it'll happen sometime in early 2011. Stay tuned.
Wow, Leonard Shlain. Please read his books if you haven't already. Incredible man. An honor to meet his daughter. I just want to first start by saying that I really personally hope that this film catalyzes an awareness of our inextricable interconnectedness and unleashes compassion and allows oxytocin to flow freely in the world. That's my...
I hope so too. I mean, it's a recent idea about the oxytocin thing, but when I heard that research, it really blew me away, because it really gave me hope. Because, I'm reading this book, What's Mine is Yours, and Yours is Mine, it's a new business. Thank you. It's great to be back here. It's such a great time here in April. And you're seeing a very sneak peek. Just last week, me and my team finished the rough cut. How many of you have ever seen a rough cut of a film? Okay, so for those that haven't, it really means it's not completely done. So you're going to see, sometimes the sound is not complete, or we're just experimenting with sound design. Some places you'll even see some text on there, like this will be animated. So when I was it's like hot off the presses, if there could be some equivalent in film, this is the case. I'm really excited to share it with you. It is a film that explores what it means to be connected in the 21st century. So I explore that in the ways that you would assume technologically, but I also explore it in a bigger sense of just about connectedness with all the major issues of the 21st century. And then I also explore it on an emotional level, in a personal way. So the tagline we're kind of playing with, and after you see it, I'd love to hear what you think. We're exploring So Connected, an autobiography about life, death, and the pursuit of technology. Because we're trying to make sure that it has this personal component. So we're still in that place where this is part of the creative process. Film is extremely collaborative. I was just talking with my good friend Jonathan about the difference. I also sculpt, which is a very private thing for me, and I don't really show my work that much, and it's much more just about being in a studio for 4 hours with a model and just doing something that I get into a different space. But filmmaking is very much, in some ways, every audience, I really feel what you're reacting to, and because this is a rough cut, I try to feel the vibe of the room, and I've had some rough cut screenings, and it's really interesting of people that don't know me versus do, filmmakers, technologists. It's really interesting how you can kind of feel a room. And so this will be also good for me because it's not done. So we'll be spending the next 4 months tweaking and showing it to various people and advisors. So you are one of the very first groups. So I'm going to show you the setup, which is the first 10 minutes of the film. Or actually, I'll probably show you maybe the first 17 minutes. Then I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to kind of jump to the end to show you where some of these ideas land. Because the second clip has, I think, a lot to do with leadership in the 21st century, because being a leader today, you have to think about the implications of the connectedness. We are in a web of data and a web of connectedness, and it has so many implications for the way you inspire people, the way that you get them activated to do something, and the way you're able to follow up with them and keep them along with whatever crusade for good you're doing, which I'm sure many of you are doing here. So I think I'm going to start with Sophocles, who said, "Nothing vast enters the life of mortals without a curse." And you'll see how I explore in the film that I really believe that technology is both a curse and has incredible vastness to it. So with that, I'm going to, hopefully we can lower the lights. I have my AV business book that just came out about how much collaborative businesses are starting and how that they're linking that to the internet, that the internet is teaching us how to be more collaborative. So that's the hope. And so as much as I struggle with technology, because you saw at the beginning, I also really wrestle with it. personally. But on the bigger picture, I really believe it's going to take humanity to the next level. And I'm an optimist.
So I just have 2 questions, and I want to open it up to all of you.
Yeah.
First, as we reclaim, reintegrate, and revalue the right brain in the equation,
Yes.
can you talk about film as a tool for change and your journey in developing this increasingly powerful influence?
Yeah, I definitely think, my father wrote about this in this book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, where if you were to read one of his books, that would be the one I'd recommend. But, that we are moving into this right brain culture with all these images. And I do think with all the data, I just had the pleasure of spending the day yesterday with MIT's geospatial labs. And, the vast data that we're able to have access to and see patterns